Hello, and a warm welcome to another episode of the Aurora School for Artists. And today I want to explain to you how you can install the licenses. But before we start with that, I would like to briefly explain to you what Unity actually is and what you can do with it. Unity is a real-time rendering program. This means you can calculate images with the engine. For example, from the mesh of the teapot on the left, a realistic image is created with light, shadows, and reflections. What you see on the right, however, it's not just a single image that is created, but rather, a sequence of images is created. At least 24 images per second, in most cases even more, namely 60 images per second, and it doesn't create a film. Instead, it creates software, an app, that calculates images in real time. This means you have the possibility that the users can intervene in the film, or rather, in the sequence of images, making it interactive. Pressing a button can, for example, lead to colors changing or displaying other objects. The software is capable of handling both 2D and 3D content and can also simulate fire or smoke. That is, visual effects. As mentioned earlier, it doesn't produce a film, which is stored on the hard drive, but rather an application that calculates the images in real time. Unity offers various platforms for this purpose. For instance, you can build apps for smartphones or create programs for computers. Depending on the end device, there are different interactions available. For example, on smartphones, there are touch gestures or the tilting of the smartphone, through which users can then interact. But in this video the focus shouldn't be to fully explain the action already, but rather, we want to download it first. And for that, let's go to the Unity website. For this, open a browser of your choice, and then type in the address unity.com. which will take you to the Unity landing page. It may look slightly different depending on when you watch the video. On the website I see the various categories for what the software can be used. For example, the gaming section. So, originally, it was developed to create games. This was and still is a major focus for many people. Nowadays, it's also possible to create movies and animations, which, for example, is interesting for us is the AR and VR sector, so people can create augmented and virtual reality applications. Before we download the software, I would like to briefly touch on one or two categories here on the website. Among them is the Made with Unity section, because here, you get information or inspiration for projects that were implemented with the engine. And you can find artist projects from other artists here. Whether it's a short film or augmented and virtual reality projects. Here, one can get inspired for their own projects and gather ideas. See what others have implemented with it. What one might still need in their own project. Then I recommend going to the learning section here. Because Unity offers a whole series of free tutorials, and don't overlook documentation on individual features of the engine. There are simply helpful tips that one can use to work a bit better with the engine. One last tab perhaps, here under the community blog, provides current information about the engine. And not just any tech information, but also reports from corresponding developers. What are others doing in the field with Unity? There are many projects and similar things. So, to stay updated and to know the latest features of the engine, I recommend checking back regularly. But now, let's finally download. And for that, there's this button. Clicking on it here above Then we get an overview of various versions, the ones that already exist. And here, we are in the business category. For companies, there are various versions available, with different support services. This is rather irrelevant for us, because for students and for private users, Unity is free, up to a limit of $100,000 that you earn with the application. We click on the Start button, and then we are asked if we've already downloaded it and are familiar with it, or if we're doing it for the very first time. We're just doing it for the first time and pressing Start here. And if we can agree to that, we press here on Accept and Download, and then the download starts accordingly. Not of the engine yet, I'll get to that in a moment, but rather of the Unity Hub. During the download, before we proceed to install the setup, I actually recommend to creating a Unity ID. That's an account with Unity, which allows us to use all of its features, and for that, up here, we can click on the tabs and then on Create ID. And here, you simply register with your email and set a password. I've done that already, but it's actually quite straightforward. You'll probably just need to confirm your email, and once you have that, then we can proceed directly with the installation. When the file is downloaded, and that should happen relatively quickly because the initial file is not so large, you'll probably find it in your Downloads folder or wherever you've chosen to save it. And then you can accordingly start it. With Windows, a window like this appears, where I must confirm the Unity installation because I need to read the license agreement first. I have to press Accept after that. And then I can install the Unity Hub at any location on my hard drive, for example, on DR. For most, it will be on C. And then click on Install. I won't do that now, because I've already installed the software. But ultimately, not much else happens, except that it installs. I'm going to pause the installation here for now, and instead open Unity Hub. And what you'll probably see is that you can sign in on the screen. This works up here with the top right button. It's already there for me, so Christoph Holtman, I'm signed in accordingly. You just enter your email address that you used to create the ID and sign in accordingly. You need to activate a corresponding license, namely the personal license. We've looked at that. I assume you don't have a business license, but rather the free version. And you need to activate it for this hub first. And to do that, press Activate New License. Choose Unity Personal, not Plus or Pro. And then you can freely choose here your preference here, and then just press Done. I've already done that. I've already activated the appropriate license. You can always do that again. If you install Unity on a new computer, you can simply activate the same license again, and then it will work accordingly just fine. So, now we've installed Unity, entered the license, and logged in here. And now you might think, we're free to go. Unfortunately, that's not quite the case because we haven't installed the engine yet, as the Unity Hub is just a preliminary platform where you can then install various Unity versions. I've installed a few now, and I'll now show you how to install the latest long-term support version, which is a Unity version that's supported for a relatively long time with bug fixes and documentation provided. And this version is always recommended for development because it has relatively few errors, and the tutorials on the website always work with the else version. And if you have any questions anywhere on any forums, you'll usually get answers, because these are the versions that are supported for the longest time. To explain briefly, Unity versions are always staggered by year, and there are currently 4 versions in a year. The 4th one was the long-term support version until now. And yes, here it is now also already. Oh, with the 2019 version, the 4th one is currently the long-time support version. So there are already the 2020 versions ones, and also the 2 is I think already in the alpha. We can have a look at that. Namely, if you now have clicks on this add button, then you get an overview of it, which versions are available right now. And we see here, for example, the 2022 version, which is currently in beta, but is not so stable. There may be bugs in it, and so I do not recommend for the development of projects. So long time supported versions. For example, also still the 2018 version. And then you can see alone that this version is supported relatively long and also is supplied with a backfix, for example. The latest version of long-time support, however, is the 201,914 F1. And if here, no 10 stands with you, for example, but perhaps any higher number, then that is not so bad. The version then hardly differ. There are then only small backfixes in it, but there are no new or any major changes. But yes, only small errors will be fixed, who have appeared accordingly, and otherwise, new features are only available here in this version. This is then always the next version that is officially released, where there are few bugs. Not so little as a rule. But it is officially released and no longer a beta. Yes, so if you need the latest features and can do without this maximum stability, then you can choose the 2020 here. I recommend for starters to take always long-time support version, and since the latest here is now the 10th, or maybe with you a bit higher, that's no difference. If we want to install them now, then we click here when we have selected them on next, and then come to another window. And this window is relevant for various platforms for which we want to develop. Here there is then the possibility to choose between different end platforms. For example, I can select here that my application, which I want to develop in Unity, I want to build for Android. I must here, according to these, select Android build support, and possibly also the developer tools, so the Android SDK and the OpenGDAK, to be able to create the Android apps as well. If you generally already have this on your computer, but Unity offers that directly here, select again separately. But here the offers that directly with. If you want to develop for iOS, then you need iOS build support. Indeed, I cannot do this at all, because I have a Windows computer right now. Then you can select the iOS build support here, and then also create iOS apps in Unity. But you can also later simply move the project onto a Mac computer, and then make the iOS build there. I do not need it here now, on the Windows version. Otherwise, selected by default are probably, if you are using Windows, the Windows build support version, ILTCPP. This allows you Windows builds. And yes, if you, for example, for Linux or MC here in the also want to create apps, then you install the corresponding packages. And if you down here want to have another language, that would be Chinese now, and so also supported in the meantime, then you can select these accordingly. documentation provides you in the engine, and few clear explanatory texts. Most of it, however, is just as easily retrievable via the website. What I then still can mention is, when you develop code, if you want to write code, in Unity you have relatively many functionalities which you can only integrate in the app with code. Then you need a developer tool, or at least one code editor. Unity offers here by default the installation of Microsoft Visual Studio. This is the community version that is free, and you can see them here, accordingly easy to install. You can, of course, also freely install via the website itself from Microsoft Director Studio. There you can download them. And of course, you can, instead of Visual Studio, can choose any other editor. Writer is one common tool here. I also link this, or also with the one in Visual Studio. You can program code for Unity. You do not have a full ID. But that is also not necessary at all because the projects or the apps are then built in Unity. So you can still select this. If you do not have something like this on your computer yet, then it is the easiest way to install this. And yes, if you have then decided here which platform you all want to support during your development, then you press next. If you have selected Android, the corresponding guidelines from Google RESP. Yes, I think it is here are the Google licenses from Android CDAK. You have to agree with him. Okay, Windows reports here again. And you confirm that you can use the Unity engine in this version. Want to install here now. Then one more window appears here. With you it would probably be the one. And now you see up here running through the blue bar, and Unity installs itself. When that is then completed, then this looks like this later. Here below you can see all the supported platforms. I have here, for example, in this version, in the 2020s version, already clearly supported. I have the Windows platform support, so the app platform for the Microsoft Store, which you see below. For example, I have the normal Windows builds. And I still have here for Magic Leap. This is a mixed reality platform. Then you decide at some point. So for example with me, it could be interesting now. If I have the 2.019 for 110 F1 installed here now, and also still have the 201,948 F1 on the computer, then it can be that you want to uninstall them someday because they eat all the memory on the hard disk. Or it can sometimes be, for example, if you have a version like down here, which does not support enough platforms, and you want to support Android, then you can click here on these 3 points, either select uninstall or add modules. And then select packages here again. I could now still install here with. This version is already installed. So for Windows build support, I have this for this version 2019. I could now here still include installing the Android package, and then in this version, also into the apps, build for Android. Maybe I'll go very briefly again, here through the Unity app. You will find here, among others, also a community website, where you come to the pages that we have just looked at. For example, the Unity blog. Or if you have questions, here is the forum. You will also go to the learning page that I have just shown you. Here you will find tutorials that in the end leads you to the website here. And the top writer is actually then the most interesting. Once you have installed a version, here you can then create your Unity projects. But we won't do that until the next video. So much for now. Hope you liked the video and it could help you to install. With that, I thank you and looking forward to the next video.